All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at all the different options here. So when you have gotten to a point where you've addressed every issue, you'll have this plus sign. That means that you can go into see and edit policies, and you can change policies at your desire. So you just can click on these, and then you can choose whatever you want. So we're going to go ahead and just put no controls and incentives at this moment. Another cool thing about this is if you look over to the right, you can actually see what every policy does. So if you just keep going down here, you can see what affects lower class growth, what affects upper class growth, etc. Immigration policy, this is a very important thing here. You can't actually just slide this over. What you have to do is you have to change policies over here, which affects your stability in order to move that. So for example, we take over a policy like this, which encourages growth, and select one that discourages growth, then it'll move the slider. Now, if you have a lot of informal settlers, which you can see by going in here, you see that you have a lot of informal settlers like I do. The reason that is because I have so free of policies for the border protection. Anyone can come in. And the idea is I want to have a lot of workers come in so my unemployment rate stays high and my population growth remains stable. If I were to close that off, my population growth would decrease. All right, so the buildings, these actually all provide bonuses, so it's a good idea to put them in when you can. And I like to put them in aesthetically pleasing locations and build around them so it, highlights them. But they can increase demand, they can increase stability, so they have a bunch of different bonuses. This is a regional fund. It's incredibly important. Right now, I'm contributing 5% of my income to this fund. I have 600,000 in my regional fund. If I wanted to, I can go into another city, go into that regional fund and take from it. And the way I would do that is I would have to exit out, and then over here I can change around money. So I can select my other city that isn't quite doing as well, and I can give them as much money as I have in the regional fund. So if I really want to, I could just drop 400,000 in here, and then when I go into that city, you'll see that the amount of money I have has increased by 400,000. So I already had about 265,000, so you can see that that gave me some money. So this is the approval. Approval, it determines whether people are throwing Molotov cocktails in your streets and rioting like crazy. I tend to just ignore them because they don't do much damage, and eventually they'll just go away as my city develops and gets better. So right now you can see I have a pretty low approval rating. This is because I'm trying to build a communist dictatorship here, so they're not very happy with that. So you can see that if you highlight it, it gives you a list of different things that are affecting your approval rating. So for example, my unemployment and sales tax is doing fine because my taxes aren't that high in the middle and higher classes. But I'm being affected by inequality because my middle class is pretty much non-existent in this city because my policies don't really give growth to the middle class. Security, environment, health is at 6 because I have over here I have pretty good ratings. I just have to increase the environment, which I'll get to later. Freedom and human rights, that largely affects my approval rating. And then also the decisions I make as I create laws, you'll see that they have different kinds of ratings. So, for example, it'd be very popular to have all taxi cabs being controlled by a state because that means that the government provides it and you don't have to worry about it. So that increased my approval rating. So pretty much when you give your citizens things, it increases it. If you take them away, it decreases. So if you allow prostitution, yeah, people are going to like that. But if you don't allow it, then people aren't going to like it. So you have to take that into consideration at times. And then over here we have the quality of life. So this is judged by the state's budget. So if I increase my budget over here, which does not cost stability, it will affect these ratings over here. So you can see my health ratings at 76. So I'm going to have to pump these numbers up here. I'm going to put them at about 40. And if you see my education, it's at 100. So I'm overpaying for it. So I'm going to lower that. It's a delicate balancing act. And as you change policies, you're going to have to play with these numbers a little bit. You should never have to spend more than 42 to max something out. However, if you want to really quickly increase something, you can pump these numbers up as high as they go. So, but I wouldn't recommend doing all that because that could be kind of costly. But if you have a large surplus, you're more than welcome to try that out. Over here, this is the demographics. This chart will tell you just about everything. These graphs pretty much useless because they only go back 20 years, so I don't even bother looking at them most of the time. So we're going to start over here. Our growth rate shows how much demand there is and how it's increasing. So if this number is more than 0, this number, the percentage, is going to go up, and so is the population. Population growth over here, this shows what percentage of people are coming into the country based on my current amount, which is 183,000. So I have a 3% growth rating, which is pretty strong, and that's because my borders are open. And you see, I don't have a middle class. My growth rate is low, and it tells you why. It shows that taxes are encouraging growth. Legislation isn't really doing anything for it because I haven't chosen many policies that would affect that. And the unemployment effect is also hampering it because I have a 36% unemployment. If people don't have jobs, they're not going to be able to get into the middle class. And my growth rate for upper income is really high, but I still am not getting people in there because you can't just jump from low income to high income. You have to go through the middle income before you can get there. So even my growth rate is high, if it's really low in the middle income, I'm not going to get anywhere. You'll see here that unemployment is 32,000 people, which is about 36% of my entire population. That's really poor. The ultimate number I like to look for is 4 to 9%, 4% being the best. If you're at 0%, you would think, oh, well, that's great because everyone's got a job, but it means that there are more jobs than people. And if you have that, then you're going to just stunt your economic growth. That's going to turn these numbers, the commercial and industrial, to 0, meaning you're not going to be able to have any real growth in your city. Informal settlers, like I said, you can get rid of them by building walls. You can get rid of them by changing the legislations to discourage informal immigrants from coming in through your immigration policies. So there's a lot of different ways that you could do that. And social mobility, this is the real killer for why I don't have middle and upper income. As you can see, my access to middle class is -1, and same with the upper class. And my downward mobility is a positive number. I'd want that to be a negative number if I'm going to increase this. So the way I would do that is by selecting policies which would encourage that. So the C and I numbers, 6 is the highest number you can get. This means that you can get stage 6 development over time. So if you look at any building using the I, you can see here that I'm at stage 5 of 6. So that's almost completely done. Eventually it'll become 6 because my industrial is 6. And that means it's more productive and more effective. Now let's look at a hotel. This is right now a stage 3. The way that's going to increase is if you look over here, you have tourism. Tourists are at 2,600. Available beds is 3,300. This number is not going to increase unless it needs to, meaning if I have more tourists, my beds will increase, which means my hotels will increase in production. And hotels are built by just building a regular commercial building. They are just arbitrarily become hotels based on need. Total activities means building beaches and building ski resorts, things of that nature that create activities. So your tourists and your activities will always be the same. So if I want more tourists, therefore more beds and bigger hotels, then I need to create more activities. So it's a good idea never to destroy any of your mountains, only use them for mining or turn them into ski resorts, because that's one of the biggest ways to get activities. Down here we have trade capacity. This is dictated by building ports and airports, things of that nature, building roads to outside the city. So what I like to do is I like to put these right on the edges of the map, and I could just fill the entire edge around this ring with them, and that's ultimately what I'll do. This will increase my trade capacity, and as long as my trade capacity is higher than my trade total, you're solid. This also builds jobs, so sometimes it's good to have an enormous trade capacity, even if you don't really need it, because it creates jobs. Um, so if these C or I numbers drop, that should be your priority, is fixing that. Typically, it'll drop if your education's too low, so you got to spend money on that. In fact, that's probably the first thing I would start putting money into out of any of these three policies. Um, and then the other way is by having a reduced demand. So right now I have positive demand for all of these. Demand shows how much growth you're going to have, and it affects these C and I numbers. If these are negative, your C and I numbers will go down. So the way that's impacted is by policy changes. So, for example, we have sales tax on cars here. One trick that I like to do, if I haven't memorized it, is I will, let's say I need to increase my middle class demand. So I would open up a policy guide, which I'm going to include in the link in the description, and then just control F for what you need. So this is sales tax on cars. So control F, sales tax on cars. Okay, let's see here. All right, sales taxes on cars. So we can see over in this column that the middle class goes up when I have no additional tax. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do no additional tax. So that's a pretty good way of increasing these numbers. The higher these numbers are, the better. And there's an exploit in the game that if you just build an enormous amount of airports, it just blows your middle and higher income out of proportion. You can get a +6, +7, which is really high. If you're at +1 or 2, that's pretty much what you're going to really need in order to see sustained growth over time. And once your city's stable and you've really accomplished the end goal of the game, you can just put it on fast forward and just go to sleep. Because once you've already chosen all your policies, there's not really going to be anything that's going to make your city fail. But you really want to make sure that your city is very stable, because if you go to sleep and wake up, your city might just be gone and it's irrecoverable. It just deletes itself if it runs out of money. Speaking of running out of money, if you ever are starting out and you really need funds and you don't have regional funds access, you can go to this budget tool, excuse me, the bonds tool over here, and you can request money. So you can just go ahead and issue bonds. Now, that does give you quick cash, but the problem is it does cost you monthly because you are paying those bonds off. So your cash flow will be reduced a little bit by doing that. You can see my monthly payments are 432, meaning that if I didn't have any bonds out, I would be making 2,421, for my cash flow. And then your credit score, that's if you keep taking on loans and keep taking them on, eventually your credit rating is going to reduce. You're going to have to pay more on it, and eventually your city is going to go bankrupt, and then game over.
Thank you for watching. I'm going to be making more content as we get closer to the release date of CityState 2. When CityState 2 comes out, I'll be making tutorials for that as well. So please like, share, and subscribe, and put your questions in the comments below. I'll address them as they come up.